Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special guest this evening, as you might well have seen, but I will introduce him later on. But as usual, I've got a few things to talk about and to update you on before we get there. Well, it's been a busy time for the family party, as always. And one of the things we've been busy with recently has been meetings around the country. I was in Dumfries last night. We had a good meeting there. But just to mention a few other ones coming up. Tomorrow night, Paisley, 7:30 p.m. in the Last Post pub in the bar. The day after, Kirkcaldy, Oswald House Hotel, 7:30. Oswald House Hotel, 7:30 on Thursday. Next week, Dundee, the Queen's Hotel, 7:30. Wednesday next week, Hamilton, 7 o'clock, the Alona Hotel. Thursday next week, it's busy times. Thursday next week, Stirling, 7 o'clock in the Cross Peels pub. So you can find all the details on social media, but it'd be great to see you if you can make it to any of those evenings. And also, of course, our conference is coming up on the 13th of November. That's a Saturday. Just to say, we're having a dinner in the evening after the conference. Almost everyone who's booked for the conference so far has also booked for the dinner. So especially if you're wanting to come to the dinner, I would urge you to book in sooner rather than later, because that's filling up faster than we expected. Let's put it that way. Now, what else has been going on? Well, I've been watching a few committees in the Scottish Parliament last week and this week, and they've started consulting about conversion therapy, the conversion therapy ban. And I'm going to make videos about it. I'm not going to talk about it at any length. But what it's heading towards is it would be the situation where, for example, if a child says, I think I'm actually a girl, and if the parent says, no, I don't think you are, I think you're a boy, you're fine as a boy, then that would be illegal, because that would be classed as conversion therapy. Or if someone comes along to a counsellor and says, I would like some counselling to stay with my wife, whereas I'm being tempted towards a homosexual relationship, can you help me to sort of leave aside the same-sex attraction and to stick with my wife? I'd like counselling for that. Then the way things are heading is looking like that might be illegal as well. So we're heading towards the situation where if a boy says there's a girl at school, you have to affirm it. The teachers have to affirm it. And the other side of the coin is they're heading towards making it illegal for anyone to actually say, well, actually, that's not right. I think you ought to reconsider that. Maybe this is not the best path for you to go down. Anyway, but you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. I'll be addressing that. Our Deputy Leader, Phil Holden, as well, is following this issue closely. He's going to be having some input on this issue as well. But another thing in the news that we've made comment on has been the vaccination issue for 12 to 15-year-olds. And the key point is that the 12 to 15-year-olds are making the decisions regardless of the parents. It's the same in England and Wales. It's definitely the case in Scotland as well. We just think this is not right. Okay, 12 to 15-year-olds, I mean, how many of them can really understand the balance of risks and benefits from it? Well, that's pretty uncertain, isn't it? I also think for these, 12-year-olds, it probably feels to them as if the adults are really abdicating responsibility. I mean, how many 12-year-olds are thinking, well, do you not know? Do you not understand what's going on here? Can you not just tell me what you think I ought to be doing? So they're probably feeling it's a bit weird, all these adults backing off and saying, oh, it's up to you. It's up to you. I do think it's undermining parents. I've heard a case for a school where they've actually said to a child, okay, don't worry. In a few months, you'll be over 12. Then you can overrule your parents and you can have this vaccination. So we think that the parental view should come first. And the way it's working, it drives a wedge between parents and their children unnecessarily. Now, if this treatment was absolutely like life-saving from a huge risk in the immediate future, then there could be a case for overruling the views of the parents. In extremis, that might be valid. But in this case, I think we're nowhere near that at all. So we're opposing this system. But what it's done, it's woken a lot of people up and made them realize that actually it is the law that 12-year-olds upwards have got the capacity to consent to medical procedures and also to medical confidentiality. Now, we think this is completely wrong. I mean, we've heard stories of young people diagnosed with illnesses, mental illnesses, and they decide they don't want their parents to know about it, so the parents don't know what the diagnosis is. This is the basis how schools, we've been talking about this recently, can deal with a child changing gender at school, but then not tell the parents. They can refer them to a gender transition clinic, and the parents are completely in the dark about it. I mean, girls can have abortions, and if a 12, 15-year-old goes to the doctor and says, whenever I take drugs, it's giving me a headache, then the parents don't need to be informed about that. So we're getting to the core of the issue. The problem is the law. It's nothing to do with the vaccines or anything currently. The problem is the law that grants these rights to children at too young an age. We think 16 would be the right age. Right, moving on, just before we get into our interview with our special guest, just a reminder, do put in comments. We'll try and respond to some of those. In fact, actually, we've got a couple already. Robert will be a Paisley. Okay, Robert, see you there. John as well. Right, so do comment. Also, remember, if you're on Facebook, apparently there's something to do with subscribing to videos, to the Scottish Family live stream on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, do give that a click. And also to share this, whatever social media platform you're watching on, you can retweet it or share it or whatever. That'd be great if you think other people would be interested to watch. Right, moving on to our special guest. Now, our special guest, I'll bring on here. Right, our special guest is Reverend Bernard Randall. Right, welcome, Bernard. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us.
Good evening, Richard. Thank you for having me on.
Now, I would imagine a lot of you are familiar with Bernard's story and his adventures with his career as a school chaplain. You've probably seen things in the media. So we're really looking forward to hearing about Bernard's story and just to explore some different aspects of it. Now, of course, Bernard's got into hot water in the educational world, which I've done my fair share of that as well. So we might compare notes at some points, but we're not here to hear my stories again. We're here to hear Bernard's story, and it's a fascinating one. Now, Bernard, I thought a good place to start would be just hearing about your career path to become a school chaplain. How did you end up in that role?
Going back sort of just the start of the story, as it were, I started off when I went to university, I was looking towards something in classics. My first degrees were classics, ancient history, that kind of thing. And I ended up doing a PhD in ancient history. Whilst I was doing that, the call to ordination came, and I answered that call and was ordained in the Church of England, having gone back to university to do theology. So I've got far more education than any sensible person needs. But having spent so long in educational chaplaincy seemed a sort of natural place to be. So I did a bit of time in parish ministry as all Church of England clergy start off, and then went to be chaplain at a Cambridge college. That was a 4-year post. That was a fixed term position. And then after that, I applied for and was successful in gaining the job at Trent College, which is halfway between Derby and Nottingham. And that's a school which they actually have a nursery. So it's effectively sort of 0 to 18 independent school with a Church of England foundation. And I was drawn to that because, young people need pastoral care desperately in these confusing times. And I enjoy the teaching as well. So that sort of combines things that I enjoy, things I think are important, things I hope I'm good at. And that's where God put me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to explain a bit more about the role of a school chaplain? I would imagine quite a lot of people are unfamiliar with it. So it involves teaching. I mean, the pastoral care, what form does that take? Is there religious life in the school as well?
Yeah, it varies tremendously. I mean, no two school chaplains will do exactly the same things because every school is different, and the chaplain is a different person in each school. So there's considerable variation. But yeah, teaching is a standard part of school chaplaincy in independent schools. State schools which have chaplains, they tend not to teach because they're generally not qualified teachers. You don't need to have a PGCE in the independent sector, though many do. So teaching in my case, certainly, and then leading chapel services, sort of the direct spiritual life of the school, and then pastoral care, which will be engaging with the young people, the children in whatever ways. So I you worked with the school's cadet force. So I'd put on the uniform and go and be with them, sort of on trips away and whatever, and that was sort of being amongst them. So it's a chaplain. A chaplain's role is to be amongst the community, and that's a really essential thing. And that's why every chaplain is different, because one person's interest will be another. I did the chess club, but another chaplain might have run a rugby team or whatever it might be in different schools.
Yeah. But what was in your job description in terms of Christian faith within the school? I mean, was it explicit that your role was there to be presenting the Christian faith to pupils? Or was that part of the constitution of the school?
Well, the founding document of the school says that the school is the purpose of the school is to educate boys and girls in England and Wales and further afield in accordance with the Protestant and evangelical principles of the Church of England. That's the sort of founding document. And within that document, this is sort of available online at Company's House if you're interested to read it. It's mostly very, very boring about the number of trustees and directors and whatever. But included in that are some bylaws which include that the doctrine and duties of the Church of England must be taught. So as chaplain, I guess part of my role was doing that, and no one else was doing it. So and when I applied for the job, the sort of description that was put together was talking about being parish priest to the whole community. And then my specific job description included commending the Christian faith and being sort of the first voice of the Christian values of the school.
Right. Now, had there been any tensions you came across before the fateful sermon, or had it all been plain sailing until then?
It was pretty good. I mean, there was a little bit of tension because on previous occasions I'd spoken about the church's teaching on sexuality, and there were one or two people thinking you shouldn't really say that. What they said to me is, you need to be careful how you say these things, which is perfectly fair enough, and I'm quite clear that I never said anything that was inappropriate, but they're sort of, perhaps they were a little bit twitchy about it, which, you know, given the world we live in, is not terribly surprising. But I've always been clear that you don't lie to the children. So if they say, you know, what is the church's teaching on any given topic, I give as best an answer as I can in terms of what does the church teach, and distinguish my own views where the church has a variety of different views available. I will say what my views are, but make it clear those are my views, and others within Christendom might have slightly different views. And where the church speaks with one voice across all time and traditions, then that would be, this is just what Christians believe.
Yeah. So in terms of the sort of LGBT issue and the training and ethos of the school, was that something that started changing quite quickly within the school? Was there a rapid movement, or was it something that had been that sort of philosophy had been gaining ground over a longer period?
Well, I think looking back, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe it was slightly. The thing that sort of triggered the problem in particular was that we had this training session by Educate and Celebrate, who have their purpose of coming into schools, and the headline is that they're teaching them how to eradicate homophobic and transphobic bullying, which is obviously something everybody would want to do. No one wants bullying of any kind. But actually the undercurrent is very much pushing the gender identity ideology and the sort of queer theory. And that was very much part of it. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you can see it writ large. But if you don't know about queer theory, you might not realize. And the sort of the big thing in the training that really stood out was having the teachers chanting about smash heteronormativity, which is straight out of queer theory. And
was there quite a high participation rate for that particular activity?
Well, it was part of a training session for all the staff. So everybody was there, and you join in with the training that you're offered. So yes, people were joining in, and it wasn't as if this came completely out of nowhere all of a sudden, unlike anything that had gone before. It was a sort of quite a participatory session, sort of, I can't remember, an hour and a half, 2 hours of training, and the leader of Educate and Celebrate, Ellie Barnes, sort of saying, now talk to your partner about this, getting people interacting, and then asking for responses to her questions out loud, and various bits sort of building up to getting everybody joining in with this sort of chanting, sort of call and response kind of stuff. So yes, people join in. Partly, some of them might have thought it was the right thing to do. Many of them just because it's embarrassing to be the person who isn't joining in with these kind of things, because you might think senior leadership are watching, and you might be noted if you don't join in, and they might be asking awkward questions. All sorts of reasons why people join in that kind of situation. So it's not really for me to say
were they
how
working
willing
with
people were.
Were they working with the pupils as well?
Educate and Celebrate don't directly work with pupils, I think. It's a bit unclear, because I wasn't really involved, because after this training I said I'd like to be involved in working out what is and isn't compatible with the Christian values of the school. I said there are a number of problems here, but they excluded me from those discussions, having said yes, we'll involve you. They just didn't. I know that Ellie Barnes came into the school again. One of the traditions in the school is a thing called the House Shout, which is actually a singing competition, and the house hall is divided into 5 day houses, and each sings a song as a sort of pop song, and there's a sort of 100 kids all singing the song together with actions and whatever. And the theme that year was songs by LGBT artists, and Ellie Barnes was there as one of the judges, so she had some involvement there. And there was some involvement, I'm not clear what, with a youth pride group, with sort of offering a bit of training to the leaders of that.
Just to throw in a snippet of my experience, the school I was working in had Stonewall coming in to do some special training for LGBT issues. And the deputy headmaster said to me, "Please don't come." It was for the whole staff. He said,
Right.
Please don't come. I said, I'd really like to come and ask questions and join in. He said, "We don't want you to come. you just go and do something else for that time."
But doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? There's something to hide here. There's something they're embarrassed about. One of the things with Educate and Celebrate, that the smash heteronormativity, such a mouthful, smash heteronormativity chant. There was a thing on their website where Ellie Barnes was talking about how they go into schools to embed gender identity and whatever in the school's life, and that their aim is to smash heteronormativity. And when my story became public and this focus on that phrase appeared, they took that video down from their website. And you don't do that if you're not embarrassed about it.
No.
You don't take it down if you think it's all absolutely right and good. They know that there's something wrong there, and they don't want people to know about it. And that's so very typical of this kind of ideological program. That they underhand is not an unfair word.
I was thinking with my case, I mean, if the school thinks that this training from Stonewall is really important, surely I should be top of the list of someone who needs to have this training. If that's what they really think, rather than you completely disagree with it, probably. So you don't need. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, indeed, and if you don't have the training and you do something that is wrong, then they can't have the defense of saying, well, you had the training, you knew you shouldn't have done it, and that's why we can do something about it. If you didn't know it was wrong because you didn't attend the training because they told you not to, it's their own silly fault if you then actually speak the truth that they don't like.
So were the rumblings in the school during this process from the pupils or staff or from parents?
Well, there was so over the course of the year, I picked up a number of pupils and staff who were uncomfortable with it in various different ways. Some of whom felt that it was wrong and just simply disagreed with the line being taken, whether that was because from a sort of Christian point of view, they felt uncomfortable. or whether sort of philosophically it just didn't quite sit right. There were some who were just confused. There were some who felt not that they were personally opposed, but the way it was being pushed was uncomfortable. One sixth former told me about how on one occasion they had in the dining hall, there was a diversity wall with a big letter saying diversity, and everybody was encouraged to go and sign the diversity wall to say that they were committed to diversity, which was supposed to be diversity of all the protected characteristics, but the word diversity was in rainbow colours, so you know exactly what kind of diversity they mean. And this sixth former said that she didn't want to sign it because she wasn't totally comfortable with it being focused on in that way. So she was pressured into signing it, and they had stickers to put out with the sort of rainbow and educate and celebrate on. And she said, "I don't want the sticker, thank you very much," and walked on. And then another person trying to sort of push the diversity wall came and put a sticker on her forcefully against her will. And it's that kind of when kids get an idea into their heads, they're enthusiastic, and that's a great thing, but they don't necessarily know when to stop, and you know, that's not so good. So it's that kind of a wide range of different people for different reasons, just not being completely happy.
Which I would imagine leads us to your sermon you delivered on this topic. I mean, I've actually read it. I thought it was excellent. So just to summarize what you thought the school needed to hear on this topic at this point.
Yeah, the reason why I gave this sermon in particular was that in the summer term every year I would say to the pupils, I'd like your suggestions for the topics I cover. The other terms I choose the themes, but for the summer, particularly the second half of the summer term, I say, you tell me what you want me to talk about, and I'll try to talk about anything that is of moral or spiritual or religious significance, whatever it might be. And so one of the things I talked about, because I got a request, was simulation theory, the idea that this entire world we think we're living in is actually a computer simulation set up by some alien somewhere or whatever, who knows what. So I talked about that because that was the request, and that was really interesting. But people came to me and said, have you still got any spaces? And I said, yes. Can you talk about how come we're told we have to accept all this LGBT stuff in a Christian school? And that seemed to me a really important question. How come we have to accept? Not which is right or wrong, but we have to accept it. And so actually I thought what needs to be heard is you make up your own mind. You don't have to accept anybody else's ideas. You make up your own mind on your beliefs based on whatever information is important to you. So that was the key message to the sermon. Make up your own mind. Listen to people, hear them out. If you don't agree, say, no, thank you, not for me. So I emphasize the importance of respecting the people we disagree with. Never any excuse for personal attacks or abuse. No one should be discriminated against simply for who they are. But when it comes to ideologies, you make up your own mind. And as an example of this, and to sort of put flesh on the bones of the kinds of things where respect is required, because just respect people in the abstract is not very helpful. You need concrete examples. So I said, you may, if you wish, believe that marriage is properly only of a man and a woman and lifelong, and that as an ideal, sex is only within such a marriage. I said, you may believe, if you wish, that biology means that there's male and female, you can't change sex, and sometimes the difference between them matters, though most of the time it doesn't. And that you may, if you wish, look at the language about gender identity and think it's incoherent, it's saying contradictory things at the same time, and therefore it can't all be true. And one of the things to notice is that some LGBT activists will lie about gender identity being a protected characteristic in law, because it isn't. And so you need to be careful what you listen to. But most of all, and I emphasize this again at the end, respect the people you disagree with. You know, they have sincere reasons for their beliefs, and it's vitally important as we seek the truth. we respect people. And that was the radical and dangerous sermon that I preached.
Just to clarify, if there's anybody listening who's thinking he's probably not mentioned the bit where he said something really outrageous, there wasn't a bit where he said something really outrageous. And I've read it. I said, that is exactly what it is. I mean, it just seems bizarre, doesn't it, that we're sitting here having this conversation on the basis of something. I mean, surely, how could anyone possibly mount an argument to disagree with that? I mean, it really is difficult to imagine how that could be done. I'm just interested, when you wrote that sermon and you went into the chapel to deliver that night, were you thinking to yourself, this is really going to be the biggie? This is going to blow up? Or were you not expecting that?
No, I didn't expect it to blow up, given that I knew that some members of staff were invested in the Educate and Celebrate programme, and I was being a bit critical of some aspects of that. I thought there might be a few people say to me, oh, I didn't like that. But I didn't expect it to blow up, because I thought, well, look, I'm giving people the choice. I explicitly said, if you agree with all this LGBT stuff, that's fine. Not a problem. Make up your own mind. So I thought, all schools, independent or state schools, have a duty actively to promote fundamental British values, which includes rule of law, things like freedom of speech and whatever in human rights. It includes democracy, where you make up your own mind. That's the point of being able to vote, is you make your own mind up. What are the other? Individual liberty. So you're free to be who you are and make up your own mind. And mutual respect and tolerance for people of other faiths and beliefs. And what I was saying was, well, respect people of different faiths. Everything I said was absolutely straight down the line, exactly what I should have been able to say in any secular institution, let alone a church school. But apparently that was not deemed acceptable.
So tell us what happened. So the service finished, and then
so then I did the sermon twice on because the school was too big, too many people to fit in the chapel. So I did it on the Wednesday, and was due to do it again on the Friday morning. And late on the Thursday, the deputy head sent me an email to say they'd had a couple of people come to him saying they weren't quite sure about it, and that somebody thought that I was saying it was okay to be homophobic, and a couple of other comments which weren't justified. Someone had misunderstood. So I checked my text again to make sure that wasn't a problem. Made a couple of slight adjustments just to clarify the language slightly, just in case. But it was late on Thursday. I didn't have time to do anything different, and I'd spent a lot of time carefully crafting it so that it was as fair and balanced and respectful as possible. And to try to mess around with it would have risked making it worse, or not suitable, rather. So I did it again on the Friday morning, and the deputy head in his email had said, well, I'll speak to you after the sermon tomorrow. And he didn't come and speak to me. So I thought, oh, well, okay, no big deal then. And then I got an email on the Sunday saying there were concerns about the sermon, and could I go in for a meeting on the Monday, and chapel probably wouldn't be happening in its normal form that week, which was the sort of first I heard that there was a problem, because you don't cancel chapel for no reason. So I was taken in for a meeting with the deputy head and the school's designated safeguarding lead, which felt rather like an interrogation. To be fair, they were very hostile. Or I felt they were hostile. They probably didn't think they were being hostile. They probably didn't realise quite what they were saying. But they started off right at the beginning saying, your faith doesn't matter, and what you've said doesn't matter. We're not interested in that. We're interested in how people are feeling about it, which put me totally on the back foot, because as far as I'm concerned, my job is to be a Christian voice in a Christian school. My job is to speak the truth. And if I've said something incorrect, pick up on that, and that's fair enough. But if I've just spoken the truth in a Christian context, what is the problem? And if people are upset by it, and a few people, it seems, were upset, is that a problem with what I've said, or is the problem actually that they are perhaps too sensitive, and that can be the case, or is the problem that they have an ideological reason for objecting to what I was saying, which seems to actually have been the case. And they'd said that they were going to send me copies of some emails of complaint beforehand, so I was prepared, and they didn't do that. They only gave them to me at the start of that meeting, which I'm afraid I don't deal well with people telling me one thing and then doing something completely different in a hostile situation. You know, I like to be able to take people at their word. So I was not at my best in that meeting because they'd not told me what was going on. I didn't know that the safeguarding lead was there, and I've seen safeguarding destroy people's careers without good cause, and sometimes there's good cause, of course, but I've seen the pitfalls there. So I'm confronted with a safeguarding person, and I've been lied to about receiving emails up front, and I'm told that it doesn't matter what my faith is and it doesn't matter what the truth is. I'm the kind of person that won't deal well with that situation.
So do you think if no one had complained, the school wouldn't have done anything?
Yeah, and I think, well, it's hard to know, because actually when I had a chance to look at the complaints, the things they said were complaints, there was actually only one person who said complaint. One person said, I want to complain. Others said, I've got some concerns, or other sort of much milder expressions. So they didn't have to take it to the extent that they did. They could have said, well, there's one complaint, and actually we can deal with that because the person complaining had totally misunderstood a number of the things I said, or was saying I had said things which I simply hadn't said. And you could have said to that person, well, you've got the wrong end of the stick here. That wasn't what was said. And let's clarify this. Here's the text of the sermon. You can see for yourself that isn't what was said. They could have set up a meeting with me and the people who were raising concerns, either individually as a group, to have some questions for clarification or whatever. There were a myriad ways of dealing with it, which they didn't take. So at the time, it felt as if they were just responding to complaints, so-called. But it may be, with hindsight, that actually there was possibly more of an agenda behind it and they were looking for an excuse. I don't know, to be quite honest. I can't look into people's minds and know exactly what they were thinking. But some of the comments made sense, and some of the things are sort of looking back and putting two and two together. I may be getting 8 or 9. I may be completely wrong, but it does look a bit fishy in places.
My experience was always that I would say what I liked wherever. But for example, the General Teaching Council of Scotland, I could say what I liked, but and I could send it to them. I could email them and say, look, this is what I've said today. This is what I said the next day. I could say all sorts of controversial things, and they wouldn't do anything until someone complains.
Yeah.
When someone complains, they swing into action, so that they haven't got any judgment of their own to bring to bear on it. They just wait for the complaint to trigger it.
Yes.
And then the ball's rolling. But it sounds like you think there's maybe a bit more than that, because the complaints were relatively mild and you felt that there was a bit of impetus behind them as well within the school.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to push too hard on that because I just don't know. And it may be that when things come to the employment tribunal that's happening next year, more will come to light. And it may be that I have to hold my hands up and say, okay, I've totally unfairly misrepresented what was going on. It was just about the complaints, and I just don't know. And I certainly wouldn't want to point the finger at any particular individuals. Things may or may not come to light, and I may never know. And sometimes that's life, and you have to put up with it.
I mean, so basically, the wheels were turning now within the school. As that became a disciplinary process.
That's right. So I had that meeting on the Monday afternoon, and they said to me, we'll go away and read these complaints and respond to them more fully, and we'll think about what's going to happen next, and I'll have a chance to sort of meet again. But actually the following day, the Tuesday morning, I was called into the head study and suspended. pending a disciplinary investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of flowed from there.
Uh-huh.
And then so the investigation took place. There was a meeting. It was the head of the junior school did the investigation. And then apparently she recommended a disciplinary hearing because the following week there was a hearing. And in the course of that week, I was sent some documents relating to the disciplinary hearing, the sort of the results of their investigation. And included in some of those documents was a sheet of which had a list of points, including that I had been referred under the PREVENT scheme for violent extremism, which I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, to be accused of being a terrorist. So, you have visions of MI5 coming and breaking down the door at 6 o'clock in the morning and hauling you off and seizing every electronic device in the house and whatever. So that's a pretty terrifying experience to go through. And just such an overreaction to saying respect people and don't descend into personal abuse. I mean, how that equates to violent extremism is beyond me.
Yeah. I mean, your story is slightly more dramatic than mine. I mean, I was told that I could potentially be seen as a concern under the PREVENT program. And I think the way the PREVENT training is geared, I think it's written by people. Well, the reason the PREVENT scheme exists, basically originally, was, I think, to pick up on people who are becoming radicalized in terms of Islamic extremism. That's what it was really designed to deal with. But I think the people who are running this were of a very particular philosophical outlook, shall we say. So they tried to use the training to bring in issues that were more in tune with their values. And I think the LGBT things became part of it. So if someone says they don't agree with same-sex marriage, they do the training, do the scenarios. That'd be something that's a bit of a concern.
Yeah. Well, I've not been party to any of the PREVENT training, so I couldn't comment directly. I mean, I know that sort of far right extremism has also always been a part of PREVENT. Though the Islamic extremism is or Islamist extremism, but it's always been violent extremism. That it's actually, if you read the official documents, that's what it's about. But then, yes, you get these people who think, we can use this against extremism rather than violent extremism. And as soon as you take violence out of the definition, anybody's strong disagreement can become extremism. But one of the things I said in my sermon was, it is not extreme to hold the view of most Christians throughout the world. It's not extreme to hold the view of the Church of England, the state church of this country, or England, as I was in. If that's extreme, then heaven help us all, really. But the person who reported me didn't see it that way.
And then the process came to its conclusion.
Yes, and I was dismissed for gross misconduct. So the Christian chaplain of a Christian school in a Christian chapel, speaking about Christian beliefs that you may hold but don't need to, that was gross misconduct, according to them. Because some people had been offended or claimed to have been offended, or they claimed that people had claimed to be offended. It's all a bit of a mess.
Now you probably, you might be reluctant to speculate, but I just wonder of the thinking process of the school leadership team to come to that conclusion, to feel that decision was going to stand up to scrutiny, to feel that the controversy it generated wasn't going to be damaging to the school, to feel that was going to stick legally and it was going to survive an appeal in a tribunal or whatever. I'm just staggered that they really thought that was like reasonable and proportionate response to it.
It's really hard to get my head around. I mean, this is one of the things that I've struggled with, because I want to forgive, and I keep forgiving, and it's 70 times 7, and I'm not there yet, but I'm doing my best along the way. But you can forgive somebody who says sorry, who owns up to a mistake, and they haven't said sorry. So you can't
Mm-hmm.
forgive them on that basis. But you can forgive people for being human. If you have a robust doctrine of the fall, you recognize that people sin, people get things wrong, not through any necessarily individual fault, but partly as a result of their place in society, partly because fallen nature is what it is. And you can forgive their humanity rather than the particular sin, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But until you can understand why their fallenness has led them to the place where they are, it's really difficult to forgive that, because it could be fallenness or it could just be malice of
Mm-hmm.
some kind that I can't understand. And it's almost as if there's this sort of nebulous, dark place behind what's gone on that I can't peer into.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be something that should be analysed in spiritual terms, or it may simply be just some people are not very bright, or they are incompetent and just didn't think about it, or they didn't seek the legal advice they probably should have done, or who knows? Busy people make silly mistakes, and it may be as simple as that.
And it's a big mistake to me. I tend to think within education, the same as within politics, there's an awful lot of people who will go with the flow.
Yes.
If they think an easy life is to go along with this, you cause controversy, you get in trouble if you say this, but if you say this, you're on the course to a straightforward career, etc. So people will choose to go with the straightforward thing. I think even if people were thinking that, making your decision, even if they're thinking that, I still think it's just so wildly excessive that even from the point of view of self-interest and trying to take the easy line, I'm just amazed that they could have come to that conclusion. But that's what happened.
It baffles me, and one of the benefits of having gone public with this story, and I did it because the employment tribunal was supposed to have happened in June, and so it's good to get the story out there first. It has to become public because it's a public court, so it was going to be out there. But one of the benefits of that is that the sermon got printed in a national Sunday newspaper, and it's on websites. You can read it, and the overwhelmingly positive response has been just so uplifting for me. But in a sense, also so, well, why on earth did they think this was a problem? Did they step back and look at it rationally? And I don't. Yes, it is a very odd thing, and maybe, as I said before, the tribunal will bring to light some of their thinking.
So you appealed against the decision that was within the school system, I assume,
that's right,
and you were reinstated.
Reinstated by the governors,
right?
With a list of sort of 20 conditions that I had to meet, which included all sermons had to be vetted in advance by a member of the senior leadership team, and I wasn't allowed to speak in chapel for more than 5 minutes. I wasn't allowed to mention anywhere in school any topic which might possibly cause any kind of offence to anybody. I had to support, both in chapel and outside, all beliefs and positions of all students, all pupils in the school, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever. So basically saying I had to affirm gender identity, even though I'd explicitly stated I don't accept this notion. But also the way it was written, interestingly, I had to affirm and support, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but I had to be positive about all beliefs, which would presumably include racist beliefs or actually homophobic beliefs or any number of these negative beliefs. The way it was written, I had to support all beliefs that people might have. I don't think that's what they meant. No. But that's a sort of illustration of how muddled their thinking was. That they couldn't conceive of anybody believing something other than what they believed. Or the person writing this couldn't anyway. And I don't know who wrote it.
So you've got to affirm everyone's beliefs apart from your own.
Well, absolutely. Except, of course, as it was written, I was also to affirm my beliefs. So how I was supposed to do that without saying anything that might cause offence to anybody, I mean, it just... didn't make sense.
Now, were they supposed to affirm your beliefs as well?
Oh no, no one's supposed to affirm my beliefs.
I get it now. Okay.
One of the frustrating things about this actually was that they never asked me about my beliefs, because in the sermon, if you read it, I'm pretty careful to say this is what the majority of Christians, or most or the majority of Christians, believe on some of these things. I didn't say this is what I believe. I said the Church of England holds that marriage is only of a man and a woman. That's written into English law, which is that's just a fact. I wasn't saying I believe this. And when I had that interrogation meeting, they were not asking me what I believe. They were just assuming that I held some extreme beliefs without exploring that, although I do on balance think that the church's teaching is correct, and actually I've thought about it more since this happened, and I'm more persuaded that the church's teaching is correct than I was before. Nevertheless, I totally accept that different people have different beliefs and are entitled to hold those, and society reflects a whole range of different ideas. And it's not for me to tell people what they can and cannot believe. I mean, that's what I was saying. You make up your own mind, and I respect people coming to different opinions on that. I might disagree with their opinions, and I might, if they want a conversation about it, see if I can persuade them to rethink.
Yeah.
But in that sense, I'm fairly clear on what I think, but I would say I'm a very moderate person in allowing there to be other opinions possible.
Yeah. And so this reinstatement under strict conditions continued for a relatively short period. Was that right?
That's right. I was reinstated at the end of September. I didn't actually get back into school till sort of middle of October, just before the half-term break. And then the following March, COVID lockdown came. So they put me on furlough because, in the midst of a national crisis, you don't need spiritual care or anyone to sort of offer kind of support or meaning in that difficult time. And then when furlough ended, well, school went back in September to in-person teaching, but I wasn't brought back off furlough. There's no reason why I couldn't have been. And I wasn't given any teaching, which I was supposed to have been given according to my contract and what I've previously been doing. Furlough ended officially in November, 1st of November. So I was due back in, and they decided to have a consultation to change my role from being a full-time job to 7 hours a week, term time only, which, if I say that's an offer you can't accept, to sort of twist the thing from The Godfather, it was a ridiculous thing. But then when I sort of indicated, well, maybe I could possibly live with it, the next day they said, we're making the post fully redundant. So that's what they did. So I was made redundant at the end of December last year.
Yeah. Right. That's absolutely atrocious. So what's next for you now? I know it's going to an employment tribunal.
That's right.
I mean, I say that I cannot imagine any school in Scotland employing me, because it would instantly bring controversy on them. And do you feel that you're in that boat as well? Are you going to go back to parish ministry, or is there something else?
Well, it's really difficult to know what is going to happen. I mean, as I've said, I think that the tribunal is now set for September next year. And in fairness, I can't see anybody in a school or even in the church giving me a job before that tribunal, because there will be things that they're thinking, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know the full details. The Trent College are not likely to give me a glowing reference and say, oh, well, the tribunal doesn't really matter. He's great. In fairness, that's not what they're going to do. So anybody looking to employ me in those contexts would be thinking they were taking a chance, and I understand that. And I can't actually complain from that point of view, galling as it is to me. So I've applied for jobs. I'll keep applying for jobs, but I'm not terribly hopeful until then. I've got a bit of teaching work with the Open University, who I actually taught for years ago when I was doing my PhD, and that doesn't seem to be too controversial because it's not relevant to what I'm doing for them that I'm ordained or whatever my beliefs are. And I'm in the process of sort of trying to write a book, reflecting a bit on my experience, but more generally on what it says about where society is, where we're going. So I hope I'll have an international bestseller and never need to work again. But
well, you can certainly come and talk about it on this live stream when that's
thank you. But failing that, yes, I mean, I just don't know what the future holds. I know parish ministry of some kind is possible, but actually having been in educational chaplaincy for sort of 10 years, I'd be a bit rusty. I'm not sure how well I would be suited to it now. These are difficult things. Ultimately, I have to trust that God will put me in the right place to do the right thing, where I can be most fruitful, and God will let me know when the time comes, I trust.
Yeah. Now, going through all this, what was the situation in terms of support? I mean, were there bishops chaining themselves to the school railings in protest? I mean, did you feel who did you feel was alongside you?
Yes, I take it your comment about bishops is slightly ironic. No, there was no support from the hierarchy at all. Individual clergy have been very supportive, and I've valued that enormously. But the Church of England hierarchy and my own bishop have been some expression involving chocolate fire guards would sort of fit. I mean, just totally unwilling to stand up and say, well, actually, this is what the Church of England teaches at the moment, regardless of any discussions that may take place and any future change that may or may not happen. This is what the Church teaches at the moment. Totally unwilling to say, well, freedom of religion is actually quite an important value in our society. I noticed Justin Welby was able to say with the Batley Grammar School teacher, freedom of religion is vitally important. But when asked about my situation, said no comment, which is an interesting contrast. And I'd probably best leave it at that. Let the reader understand.
Yeah. But what I found going through my case, what I find I really thirsted for, if you like, is for people to come out and say, what he said, children need a mum and a dad. That's what I think too. And so, stand with him on that. But lots of people were supportive in the background, which was great, which I absolutely appreciate. But really, I think what you crave, well, certainly I did, what I craved in that situation would have been institutions, organizations, or individuals to just come out publicly and say, we basically agree with the point he was making here. I mean, yes. You had a Christian Legal Centre supporting you, didn't you?
They have been absolutely fantastic. So go to their website, christianconcern.com/Bernard, and that will give you more information about my case and other stuff. So do look at that. But they have been fantastic, and the sort of not only the practical and legal support, but the sort of moral support, keeping me literally keeping me together at times. That has been amazing. And actually, in terms of institutions, I mean, precious little of it. But to have a 4-page spread in the Mail on Sunday and have my sermon printed, that's not something that happens every day.
No.
And that has been absolutely tremendous. And the sort of, it's not all of society, but it's an key indicator of society when the papers pick it up, and the Times and the Telegraph also ran supportive pieces. And you say, actually, this is what people think, that you should be able to say these things, and there wasn't anything wrong or objectionable in what I said. Even something like Pink News, which you'd expect to be hugely vociferous, couldn't really find anything to complain about. It was a little bit along the lines of, Christians being a bit dodgy, but that was about as bad as it felt. It was really mild by the sort of standards you might have expected, because there just wasn't anything that you could pick up on and point to and say, that is wrong, or that is homophobic, or that is, there was nothing negative there, which makes the school's response all the more extraordinary.
Yeah. I wonder what they're thinking now, having seen all this publicity. I mean, are they thinking, oh, what have we done here? Or who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? One of the interesting things is that, well, one of the charges against me was that I'd risked bringing the school into disrepute. And risking doing it is not the same as actually doing it. So I'm not quite sure what the charge was there for anyway. But in my appeal, I pointed out, if it came to light that the school was sacking me for speaking about freedom of religion and making up their own mind and fundamental British values, that would bring the school into disrepute, which is what has happened. So, they were warned and chose not to take any notice.
Yeah. But my experience would be quite different in that there are lots of institutions who are willing to sort of wave the gun at me and threaten, but none of them wanted to pull the trigger. But it was trying to pass me on to the other one. And it's obvious that quite a few organizations would really be delighted if another one would actually, put me for the chop one way or another.
Yeah.
But it just seemed that they were a bit worried about the controversy. So I think maybe they just had that little bit more common sense and good judgments than the decision makers in your case. So we will watch with interest to see how the case develops. And with the tribunal, well, what could be the outcome of that? I mean, could they be forced to reinstate you, or
they can't be absolutely forced. They can be ordered to reinstate, but if they say that they can't for whatever reason, then they can't be forced to. But if they don't, then there would be sort of further compensation. So there's financial compensation, injury to feelings and loss of earnings. If I'm in a position where I can never work again at that level, then that's potentially a significant award if everything is absolutely in my favour. They can also order sort of staff at the school to undergo training and such like. So, asking them to go through training in human rights and freedom of speech, freedom of religion. That would be quite a nice thing to see. And just a declaration that the school got it wrong and that this was not the way that you should do education in the modern world. In a liberal, secular democracy, you should not have one belief system excluding others. Granted that in a faith school, that's the primary belief system of that school community, that's allowed, but you shouldn't be forcing out other beliefs, and you shouldn't be forcing a secular belief system. And the gender ideology, the queer theory stuff is effectively a religious belief that is being forced on young people and on society, and it's just not owning up to the fact that it is a religious belief in basically every respect that matters.
Can you imagine, the person who made the complaint, the particular complaint, as we've got the ball rolling? I mean, can you even imagine having that sort of power? That if you hear something that you don't like, that you disagree with, you can just fire an email or make a phone call, and you can just turn someone's life upside down.
Yeah, I don't know whether that person knew what the outcome would be, or even hoped for a particular outcome. I mean, that's beyond what I can know. But it's one of those things where people have this, or seem to have this, sort of absolute moral certainty. We are on the side of right, and those who disagree with us are evil. And that seems to be the sort of the woke tendency, that it's good against evil, and we are good, they are evil, and if they are evil, we can do anything we like to them, and it doesn't matter. Whereas I think people of a more liberal and perhaps conservative tendency will be not, they are evil, but we believe we're right, we believe they're wrong, but everybody has a share of good and evil, and they're but for the grace of God, or they're but for whatever belief system I have. I could also be in that situation. And if you give absolute power to one group today, then tomorrow another group will have it and hit down on the ones who used to have it. And that's a recipe for cycles of destruction rather than building up a positive society.
Yeah. But the days of tolerance seem to be over. Tolerance was the buzzword, wasn't it, back in the in the 90s. Into the 2000s, even people were talking about tolerance. You don't hear so much about it anymore. There's got to be affirmation, equality, or whatever. It's more crushing dissent rather than valuing, tolerating diversity of
That there is
opinion.
a lot of that, and the word diversity means believing exactly what we believe rather than actual diversity very often. But I do think that the majority of people don't think that way, and when push comes to shove, don't like it, and if talked about in sensible ways, can see that they don't like it. It's just most people are too busy getting on with life and all it throws at them, and putting food on the table and a roof over their children's heads, to stop and think about these things. But I reckon 95% of the population, if they have to stop and think about it, will say, well, of course you should make up your own mind. Of course some of these things are extreme. It's just persuading people that this is actually a thing that they need to just give a few moments of their time to.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me on.
When your book's done, we'd be delighted to hear about it. I will
I'll
read
look
it
forward to
for
that.
sure, and we could have a chat about it. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks those of you who are watching later on as well. Thanks for your comments. I didn't get to any. Again, I was too engrossed in the conversation. But thanks for watching, and see you next week. Good night.
Good night.